heaven look on and would not take their part? Act 4, Scene 3. The hill on which Dunsinane stood was 1,000 feet high. One steep, crude path slanted up to the fortress. It was a struggle for man and beast to climb that hill, even on the path. Off the path, the hill was raw with jagged stone outcroppings, sharp cliffs, and deep gaps. Every tree had been cut down so no one could creep unseen toward the fortress. The ancient stronghold had no windows, just arrow slots. There was no lovely solar up there, no separate servants' quarters, no fine kitchens, no place to stroll. This was an army post. A king did not come to Dunsinane to be loved by his people. He came to Dunsinane to fight the enemy. A cleft ran down the hillside, where at some ancient date there had been a rockfall. Roots 100 or 1,000 years old wrapped themselves around the stones. Tangled trees gave cover through which no eye could see. Prince Malcolm and his officers crept down the rockfall, threading through twisted birch and dwarfed fir. The English captains and the Scottish thanes talked of battle plans and strategies. They wormed closer, gently moving branches and studying Dunsinane through the leaves. On the far side of Dunsinane, Fleance saw a thread of road stretching emptily towards the Sidlaw Hills. From his towers, Macbeth could see for miles. "If we come out of Burnham Wood at the top of our hill," Seward was saying, "we'll have this long open slope to go down. We'll be within arrow range. If any of our men live to reach the bottom of the hill, they will now have to go up to Dunsinane. It'll take both hands to clamber up that rock face. No soldier will be able to hold a shield or sword." Fleance knew what it was to need both hands. It was helplessness. It was defeat. "Our only choice is to use the path, raising our shields over our heads for cover." "Once we get up the path, though," said Lord Lennox gloomily, "the men won't be able to get any purchase on such a steep hill. We can't use a battering ram on the gate. We'll have no place to stand." They stared at the impregnable fortress of the murderer, Macbeth. Seward was a brilliant general, but even with 10,000 men attacking, would Dunsinane fall? A servant boy had crept along after them, carrying the water. Now he took his leather casket from man to man, easing himself over rocks and roots, delivering a sip. Nobody saw him, because nobody ever really saw servants. The officers just drank the good, cold water. "And even if we could carry ladders," said Lord Monteith, "there's no flat place to set them." "Our ladders are too short anyway," said another. "We can't scale the wall." "We have to coax Macbeth into open combat," said Prince Malcolm. Lord Macduff shook his head. "He'll never do it. Why should he? Sitting there in that castle, he's safe. Out in the grass, he's at risk." Far down that road that came to Dunsinane from the east, Fleance saw movement. He squinted to see who could possibly have decided to join Macbeth. But the officers were distracted by someone inching through the underbrush, coming down from Burnham Wood to join them. Yet another lord. In weeks past, Angus had come, then Lennox, Monteith, Caithness, and Macduff. What could it be like for Macbeth, as every thane who had sworn to him now went to the other side? Fleance hoped it was like hell. Who should appear now but Lord Ross, who almost wept to see that Fleance was safe and well. They embraced as much as the terrain would allow. "Your father would be so glad you survived," said Lord Ross. "You were all that ever mattered to him, Fleance." "Do you have any news?" demanded Prince Malcolm. Ross let go of Fleance. "The tyrant just keeps killing. There are so many funerals that people hardly look up to ask who died." Then he sighed and turned to face Macduff. "What I have to say will not comfort you. My dear Duff, don't hate me for being the messenger. Macbeth had your wife and babes slaughtered. No one survived. Macbeth shall never vanquished be, until great Birnam wood to high Dunsinane hill shall come against him. Act 4, Scene 1. Mary could see the hill that must be Dunsinane. She trembled. Dark, looming walls seemed to spurt out of the bedrock. This was a terrible place, where someone would come to a terrible end. When they got closer, she would probably see the arrow slits, but from here, the walls looked as slick and sightless as the inside of the hollow tree. It had but one tower, a square, thuggish-looking thing, and below it, all the way around, a parapet that looked empty but wouldn't be. Dunsinane was not a place for people to live. It was not even a place for people to fight. It was a place where people retreated. Mary's heart collapsed at the thought of entering this place of siege and slaughter. The English would bring catapults to smash holes in these walls, or undermine the foundations and tunnel under their feet, or tip their arrows with tar and set them afire, and soon the wooden roof would be blazing. And no one in either army cared if Mary of Shield came out alive. She looked beyond the grim fortress. Never had Mary seen a forest so deep, so dark. Through the night they would hear wildcats scream and wolves howl. Soon they would hear the drums of an attacking army, an army led by men whom once Macbeth had led. Did Macbeth know that he, who had wanted the world, had ended up with the world against him? Did Lady Macbeth know that she, who sold her soul for honor and glory, was cowering inside a great stone? Your castle is surprised. Act 4, Scene 3. If I could get into Dunsinane, said Fleance, I could open the gate for you. They stared at him. How? Said Seward. Fleance pointed. Somebody's coming. One person on a horse and one person walking. I'll join them. They looked sceptical. I'll say I'm a stable boy who got caught by the English troops and just now I managed to escape. I'll beg them to let me shelter inside with good King Macbeth. Prince Malcolm shook his head. Macbeth would recognize you, Fleance. He'd love to kill you. Remember, he's already tried to murder you once. I have a duty to your father to keep you alive. I have a duty to my father to avenge him, said Fleance. Macduff said ferociously, I'm killing Macbeth. He's mine. But I'm finding the third murderer, thought Fleance. He's mine. I so swore, and I will do so. I'll open the gate, he promised them, and then all Macbeth's army will be yours. They stripped off the fine clothing the English had found for Fleance. They put him in the dirty, worn clothes of the little water boy. Lennox rubbed leaf mould into Fleance's hair and over his face and neck, and then they splattered him with some of the water and muddied his face. A little blood helps, said Ross, slicing Fleance's arm before he knew it was happening and smearing the blood on his face and tunic. Then Ross tore off the sleeve and with the rag bound the wound he'd made. Godspeed, they whispered, patting his shoulder. He knew they did not expect to see him again, nor did they expect him to open the gate. They would have another strategy, but he would keep his word. 2 promises, one to his father's shade, one to his father's friends. He crept on down. The ravine got shallower and had fewer trees, but it carried him to the very foot of the hill of Dunsinane. He crossed himself, took a deep breath, and burst out, waving both arms at the 2 travellers coming toward him. Like a sheep, Fleance bleated, Help me, please! The rider was a man, wearing good clothes, while the walker was a woman wearing rags. Any man wearing good clothes and going toward Macbeth was a noble in the enemy army, and Fleance could not risk being recognized. He stumbled, tugging respectfully at his forelock and cap, while hiding behind his hand and keeping the cap low. Then he turned so he was facing Burnham Wood. He pointed to the top of the hill, so the noble's eye would land higher than where the tangle of officers and Prince Malcolm were hidden. "Full of Englishmen, sir. Danger, sir. I'm a stable boy. The horse attended went lame, and I fell behind. The English caught me. I got away, but I got hurt. Please take me with you into the castle." The noble did not care whether a stable boy got hurt. "How many men?" he demanded. "Too many to count, sir." Fleance started running toward Dunsinane. "Are they planning to attack right now?" asked the man. "I don't think so, sir. I think a siege. They're talking of engines." Fleance was panting already. The hill was very steep. The man laughed. Fleance knew that laugh. "Nobody can take Dunsinane by siege," said Seaton. "No English strategy matters. Dunsinane cannot fall until Burnham Wood actually moves. The Weird One said so, and since trees don't move any more than hell ices over, Dunsinane is forever safe. So you and I, Lady Mary," he said with venom, "we have time for a wedding this evening, don't we?" Fleance stumbled, caught himself and ran on. To get inside Dunsinane, he was using the two people in Macbeth's court who most wanted him dead.